All right, welcome to episode 3 of It's That Deep. If you listen to the last episode, you made it with me through the recap of January to June of 2023. We spoke about everything. Well, not everything, but we spoke about a lot of what transpired in the first 6 months of this year. And we're going to get into the second half of this year because I, in a weird way, feel like more happened in the second half of this year, maybe just because it's more recent. But I'm excited. And of course, we have to start with the best month of the year, my birthday month, July. So with July, I couldn't pick. I'm trying to limit myself to one story, but I couldn't pick. So we went with 2. Cinema was eating good with the release of Barbenheimer. Barbie and Oppenheimer both released on the same weekend, killing the box office, and really like restoring the days of like the cult classics where people used to like, even the days of Black Panther. Do you remember when people used to dress up in their finest Ankara, finest kente, and go to, I don't know why we were doing that. I don't know why we did that, but you know, to go and watch the movie. And we did the same thing with, I say we, I haven't actually seen Barbie or Oppenheimer, but people were doing the same thing for both of these films. Barbie broke massive records. You know, first of all, that budget was insane. Like, I was seeing Barbie everywhere. They took up space in Zara. I think they did something with the Burj Khalifa. Like, that budget was incredible. And it then became the highest grossing live action comedy film of all time. And I'm sure there's some awards that Greta Gerwig has won, being like the first female director to blah, blah, blah. But yeah, cinema was eating good. And that was a good time. July is my birthday month. It's a great time. Of course, it's going to be a great time. But I don't know if this was not so great. I'm not even really sure how I feel about it. But at the end of July, what we did see was Elon Musk following through with his commitment to ruin Twitter. At the end of the month, he changed Twitter from Twitter to X. So in 2022, he acquired Twitter for billions. And almost a year later, he decided to change its name and its logo to X. Just X, nothing more, nothing less. And he reset the whole thing. He laid off staff. He restored, that's a key one. He restored a lot of extremist accounts that had been banned previously. So the likes of Katie Hopkins, what's that guy's name? Tommy Robinson, leader of the EDL. Those accounts were restored, and I lied because I said I'm not sure how I feel about it, but actually, for anyone that is on X, I don't know if you can relate, but it just feels like, because Elon Musk is like big on like freedom of speech, but again, people who say they're big on freedom of speech are only big on freedom of speech when it swings one way. But we've definitely seen a rise in like incels and bots just commenting and tweeting or posting absolute nonsense, like racist, homophobic, you know, misogynistic, all of the above. And that it feels like X is just a minefield and there's no real like regulation and like guidelines, and you can't say that. And I think he's also introduced this thing where like the more outrageous your tweet is and the more clicks and the more traction it gets, you get paid now. So obviously that's an incentive for people to just tweet dumb stuff. So I lied. I do know how I feel about it, and I think it is nonsense. But that was July. Okay, we're moving quick. Let's get into August. August was the month Ashake came back to the UK for the first time after the very fatal concert crash in December of 2022 at Brixton O2 Academy. I was actually at the concert that day. Yeah, way too early for him to come back. And I know he honoured and made mention of the women who lost their lives at the show. I just think it's too early. I cannot lie. Just my opinions. I saw what happened on that day, but anyway, we won't get into that. We also learnt a lot about Lizzo in August. She was accused of bullying, accused of slut shaming, accused of abuse by a group of her ex background dancers. That's a story that's disappeared. After August, I have not heard anything in regards to like Lizzo and what happened with, those complaints and those allegations. That's literally disappeared into thin air. I'm gonna have to investigate that. But for me, and for a lot of people, particularly in the UK, the story of Lucy Letby dominated headlines. So Lucy Letby was a 33-year-old neonatal nurse that, was it last year? I think it was last year. She was accused of murdering or attempting to murder over 10 newborn babies on her ward. Yeah, this story was mad. This story was very mad. The maddest thing is that her crimes span back almost 10 years, because her first recorded death was in 2015. But in August, she was found guilty on 7 counts of murder. And she was sentenced to life in prison. And if we're talking about, beating records, which we spoke about in the first episode, she became, at that point, the most prolific child serial killer of all time in British history. This is another one of those stories where you just scratch your head. You're just like, what does this even mean? How was she able to do this? And then there's also that emotional side of like the pain that she inflicted on these families. There's a particular story where she killed 2 of the triplets, particularly significant for me. Like, she's actually a monster. And I remember I made a TikTok at the time speaking about a phrase which I guess, professors of rhetoric call testimonial disadvantage. It's something I studied at uni and I wrote my dissertation on. And I strongly believe that because Lucy Letby was a working class, maybe lower middle class white woman, smiley face, she was young, and she worked as a nurse, none of those demographic descriptions line up with a lot of people's perception of what a child serial killer looks like. And for that reason, she was able to do that for almost 10 years. She was killing children. And I also believe, still on the note of testimonial disadvantage, that because the charge was led against her by an Asian man, albeit massively respected doctor in the profession, he was a man and he was B, Asian. And because he was leading the charge against a white woman who many perceived to be delicate and incapable of that kind of behavior, none of the charges, none of the claims or accusations against her were taken seriously until it became too late. It's mad. It's mad that happened for so long and was allowed to happen for so long. So amazing that she's finally been brought to justice, and I hope that they melt that key. And then once they've melted it, they should bury it in the sea, and she shouldn't see the light of day. But speaking of people who won't be seeing the light of day for some time, in August, Tory Lanez was also sentenced, not to life, but to 10 years in prison for shooting Megan Thee Stallion in the foot in 2019. If you remember, he was convicted by a jury last year, the whole Rock Nation, you'll crumble, all of that. And then this year he was actually sentenced. There's a lot of conspiracies about how that actually went down and if Megan is the victim that she says she is. She wrote a piece in the New York Times where she spoke about the fact that, women are constantly, particularly black women, constantly disregarded, constantly not believed, and a lot of people had a lot to say about her being responsible for the crime that was committed against her. So I'm really glad that she spoke out. And she said, you're not going to try and victim blame me. And for everyone that's crying that Tory Lanez is in prison, cry some more. Cry some more. Okay, so let's move on to September, because we started on a good note. It was, the final season of Top Boy. Many say it didn't end the way it should have. I'm impartial. Coco Gauff won her first Grand Slam title, which was amazing. Started off the month with Joy, and then it got dark really quickly. September was the month that The Times and Channel 4's Dispatches released basically what was an expose on Russell Brand. So The Times released an article detailing numerous accusations of sexual violence, sexual abuse, rape, and like spanning back years basically. And then that was followed up by a Dispatches documentary by Channel 4. I watched the documentary. It was terrible. And I think what was even more terrible was the fact that like his behavior, like Russell Brand, he did this in plain sight. Like there's so much evidence of his really crass behavior on radio, because this was a guy who like at a point was a national treasure. Like he was on radio, he was on TV, he was everywhere, and every platform that he had, he was actually letting us know what a maniac he was. Like that's just as alarming as, actually no it's not, but it's still alarming in the way that the accusations are, because it speaks to the fact that there was a culture of covering it up, and that's something I see all the time in TV. Oh, I have stories like when somebody is as big as Russell Brand and they're called talent, you are supposed to turn a blind eye to talent's behavior, because they're talent, they're bringing the money, right? We're supposed to all like, they're treated like gods essentially on sets. And so it's another story. Actually, this one hasn't disappeared as much as Philip Schofield, which we spoke about in part 1, but it's just like, especially with sexual assault, sexual abuse, it's sort of just like part and parcel of the industry these days. And it's like someone gets revealed to be a nonce, or someone who assaults people, and then it's on to the next news story. So I don't know what's happening with Russell Brand. I know he had a few more allegations from women over in the States, which we're going to talk about in November, but he's another one that has just disappeared off the face of the earth. Tim Westwood, thank you Holy Spirit, Tim Westwood, we're coming for you. Right, okay, cool. Again, like I said, September's really dark, and we ended the month on a really, really, really sad note. So at the end of the month, a 15-year-old schoolgirl, Elianne Andam, tragically lost her life in a knife attack in Croydon on her way to school. When I was writing the script for this particular part of September, I got a lump in my throat, because this was just so incredibly sad. Like, this was so sad. The fact that, like, she was so young, so vibrant, and even if she was none of those things, the fact that people are just walking around willy-nilly just killing people with knives, I will never understand that. But it's one of those stories where you remember where you were when it happened. Like, I remember where I was when Barack Obama got inaugurated. I remember where I was when Michael Jackson died, and I remember where I was when the news broke that Elianne Andam had been murdered. Yeah, I mean, just really, really sad, and I hate to, and I don't want to politicize somebody's death, especially a teenager's, but like I said, there is a theme that we've seen this year and in years prior, but there is this thing about femicide and violence against women, and even a step further, this culture of consent. Like, the story is that she somehow got caught in the crossfires between her friend and her friend's ex-boyfriend, who were, I guess, having a tiff or something, and she must have stepped in, and that's obviously where everything unfolded. And so again, like, there's another conversation there about consent, and it's always just say no, right? But violence against women and femicide is a big thing, and sometimes just saying no is still not enough. But yeah, really, really, really sad story. Really sad story. Probably the worst this year for me anyway. Probably the worst this year. It just didn't need to happen. Did not need to happen. She was doing her GCSEs. Like, you just 15 doesn't make any sense. Rest in peace, Elianne, and love and all of the blessings to her family, because I cannot imagine what they're going through. We are in October. We're in October, and Big Brother makes its return back to our screens after 5 years off the TV. I didn't actually watch this season. I wasn't sure how it was going to go down. I just feel like, influencer culture, everyone wants to be a Molly May. So I was just like, is it going to work? But my sister said it was all right. So maybe I'll watch it next season. This was also the month that the Tory and Labour parties had their annual party conferences. David Beckham dropped his Netflix documentary, and unfortunately we lost Matthew Perry. I've been rewatching Friends since the death of Matthew Perry, and his comedic timing is truly phenomenal. Yeah, very, very few actors like him, so that was a sad loss. But there's literally only one story to talk about in the month of October, and that was always going to be the Palestine and Israel conflict. So on October 7th, Hamas launched an attack on Israel from Gaza, killing thousands. Now, in retaliation, Israel, they put out one dark statement. The president of Israel put out one really dark statement, basically saying you're gonna get your lick back. And since October 7th, they have been killing Palestinians, all in the name of eradicating Hamas. But a lot of where, just from my reading, because I know this is a very technical topic for a lot of people, but where they have been bombing and where they have been focusing a lot of their airstrikes and a lot of all of that has not been where Hamas has been. It's been where civilians are, and so civilians have been displaced. They lost electricity at a point. They have been running out of food and water. They have eradicated a lot of the infrastructure on the Gaza Strip, and that's why, if you're curious as to why people are calling it a genocide, that is why, because they're essentially wiping out these Palestinians and erasing any sort of life possible. This is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most divisive news story of the year, without a shadow of a doubt, because it feels so binary. It feels so, you're either pro-Israel or you're pro-Palestine, and there have been so many offshoots of this one conflict. There's been conversations similar to what we spoke about in the first part of this Unwrapped, about celebrities and their roles as political voices, and whether that's even something they should be. There's also been a conversation about the global church and what our role is as, the church, Christians, in condemning or supporting the conflict, and just so many offshoots. But I think the biggest one for me that I've seen, and one that I've alluded to throughout this part and then also the previous part, is this culture of protest. There were millions of people globally, but let's even just talk London for a second, like on a weekly basis, people were rocking up to central London on both sides, but primarily pro-Palestine, protesting, millions. And it wasn't even just central London. There was some in East London, in different pockets of the capital. This culture of protest, I lump protest and strike in the same sort of category. And like I said, we've seen it from the start of the year, from the nurses' strike to the junior doctors, then to the writers' strike in America, and now this current issue of Israel and Palestine. There is something that's happening where people are taking back what they believe is their authority, and I'm here for it. Like, people are marching in front of Westminster, holding their MPs to account, emailing their MPs. There is a real culture of, we elected you. Let's not forget we elected you, and you are not acting in the best interests or in the wishes of your constituents. So we're going to protest. And again, another prediction for 2024, I don't have many, but I do believe this protest strike culture is going to continue massively. We are almost there. November. I'm so sorry to do this to you guys. July-Barbenheimer. I'm so sorry. She's a jump scare. I'm sorry, but we have to talk about her because she got booted from the Conservative Party. Actually, on this topic of Israel and Palestine. So she wrote an opinion piece, which I didn't know politicians were writing opinion pieces. I didn't know that was a thing. Anyway, she wrote an opinion piece in the Times, basically saying that this issue of protesting, like on the issue of protesting, that senior police officers are being very lenient when it comes to what she called left-wing Palestine supporters. Actually, she called them mobs. And this is why I say language is so important, because calling pro-Palestinian protesters mobs automatically frames things in a particular way. But she wrote that piece in the Times, and apparently there was a kerfuffle, a little tussle with her and Rishi Sunak's office, and they basically had asked her not to retract, but she'd sent the piece ahead of time to them, and they'd asked her to edit it, and she said no, and it went out, and obviously it caused a lot of backlash. And so I think it was like 8 days later, he reshuffled the cabinet and he kicked her out. Rishi Sunak did well. He did well. I give him that. It was a massive mess up on her part, but she got replaced by James Cleverly, who was at the time Foreign Secretary. And in the whole scheme of all of the things, what we did not expect was David Cameron to step out of the car at Downing Street and assume position as Foreign Secretary. This guy spun the block. He said, yeah, I'm going back to my old thing. He stepped out of that car and everyone was so confused as to why. So Rishi appointed him that morning as Foreign Secretary. And I just want to say, like, this is how conservatives reject democracy. Because it's crazy that in a first world country, one of the superpowers of the world, a man that nobody elected, Rishi Sunak, is able to give another man that nobody has elected since 2015 a life peerage in the House of Lords and appoint him to one of the highest offices in the country. Is that making sense for democracy? Is that normal? Nobody's elected David Cameron since 2015. That was the last time the people went to polls for him. Nobody elected Rishi Sunak. His party voted him in. No, I didn't. I didn't vote that guy in. And you're going to tell me that those are two of the most senior politicians in this country? It doesn't make any sense. We are making headway. We're almost at December, but before December comes November. And this is actually a developing story at present. Actually, before I hit record, more stuff came out this morning, particularly about TD Jakes, but I swear to you, I'm not going there. I'm not doing it. So we're going to focus purely on Diddy. In November, Cassie filed a lawsuit against Diddy with claims of domestic violence, of rape, of abuse, assault, all of those things. First of all, am I the only person that had no clue that Diddy was amongst that camp of men? Like, I genuinely was so shocked when that came out. But people around me were like, yeah, you didn't know about Diddy? I'm like, bro, I had no clue that Diddy ever or would ever do that. Maybe I'm showing my age, but I was shocked, honey. Although, you know, I'm not sure it's possible to prosper in the culture of hip hop the way he has. That's such a toxic and misogynistic culture. So I'm guessing he must have done some toxic and misogynistic things to get to where he is. So maybe I was just being dense. But she filed a lawsuit against him, and the very next day the lawsuit was dropped. They settled out of court. I don't really know that indicates that he's innocent, because since Cassie there have been a bunch of Jane Does who have also come up with their own allegations, and also even people without the legalities corroborating what Cassie had said in her lawsuit. But what was interesting was that it opened the floodgates of like numerous lawsuits against stars and public personalities. It was crazy. We saw stuff against like Jamie Foxx, Jonah Hill, Cuba Gooding Jr. All of these people had allegations coming out about them. So in general, I do have to say it's not been a good year for Hollywood or entertainment, No, I was going to say particularly the US, but also here. It just feels like people are really seeing how dark arts and entertainment, music, TV is as an industry, you know, from strikes to sexual abuse allegations and to probably more that's going to come out. So Hollywood's going outside, Sha. Okay, December. Good old December, the Christmas season. So we lost Benjamin Zephaniah at the start of the month, who for many writers, particularly black writers, black artists, poets, significant loss. Not only for who he is, but what he represented as well. And then over in the US, we lost the Brooklyn Nine-Nine star, Andre Bauer. But we did get some wins. There was a really nice win, I would say, in the US. The FDA approved a gene editing treatment for people with sickle cell disease. Kind of a nice way to end the year. I know it does cost $2 million per, patient, but we've seen a lot of headway with sickle cell treatment this year. I cannot lie. So it's a step closer, as expensive as it is. It's a step closer to it being a globally recognized disease and being given the same gravity as other diseases. So I consider that a win. And speaking of wins, we're gonna end this episode the way we started the first part of this 2023 Unwrapped, and we're gonna talk about Prince Harry, because he ended the year on a win. I've spoken about this on my TikTok. He took the Mirror Group newspapers, so the Daily Mirror and the Sun, to court. And you know what? I think he's very brave. He has obviously broken away from the establishment. He's doing a lot that people would look at him and be like, you're not supposed to do that, you're a member of the royal family. But he's done it all for his sake and for the protection of his family. So the trial against the Mirror Group newspapers actually started in May. It started in May. And like I've said before, he was not the only one to take them to court. I believe Cheryl Cole also took them to court, Ian Wright, and a few other celebrities. But obviously he's the highest profile. But he took them to court over phone hacking, and claims that they had been hacking his phone since he was a boy, since he was like a teenager. So in December, the High Court ruled in his favour, and they concluded that the Daily Mirror and the Sun have been hacking his phone for years, and it's the hacking that they use to get stories about him, about his personal life, and obviously sell and make loads of money. There was also an admittal of, number one, the fact that some stories also were leaked from the royal household, which again is something he talks about in Spare, if you listen to the first part of this Unwrapped, and which he's been banging on about. Even in his interview with Oprah, people from his family have been leaking stories about him. And then two, they also admitted that Piers Morgan, they specifically named Piers Morgan, and they said that he oversaw hacking and also conducted hacking himself, which is always a win. Anytime Piers Morgan is caught in a lie, it's a win for me. So that wraps up December 2023 and 2023 as a whole. Now, there's a lot of stories that I have missed. There's stories unfolding right now as we speak. Congo would have just gone to the elections. Much is happening around the world. I would love to hear some of the stories that you guys think I've missed, that you guys think are worth discussing. I'd also love to know some of your predictions for 2024. I have a few, but this world is very unpredictable. So 2024 should be an interesting year. We have an election coming up in the UK, and we'll just see. We'll see what happens. Thank you so much for listening to part 2 of this 2023 Unwrapped. I hope 2023 has been a good year for you, and if it hasn't, may 2024 be everything 2023 wasn't. Have a great new year, and we're going back to weekly stories in 2024, so stay tuned. Follow me on all of the socials. It will be in, if you're watching on YouTube, in the description. Follow the podcast on Spotify, share it, and let me know your thoughts. So thank you so much for listening to It's That Deep, the podcast, and I'll see you in 2024. Peace.